Lighting is everything, guys, because if you know how to light a scene properly, or in this case an object, then you can pretty much make any camera look professional and cinematic, whatever you want. So today I'll show you how to light a can with just one simple light. And of course we also need a camera. I'll use my Canon M50. It took me like 5 minutes and some quick editing in Photoshop to get these shots. Seriously, easy peasy, lemon squeezy. So good to see you all again, guys. I hope you're all doing well, and I also hope that you're ready for a good old simple product photography tutorial. But before we dive into that, or jump into that, jump into that, what do you native English speakers say? Dive into that or jump into that? Or get into that? Or all of those good? I don't know. So before we start, I just want to say thank you, because every week more and more people join this community and it's just so much fun because of all of you. So thank you for that. And if you're new here, welcome. But anyway, let's light a can. So there are a bunch of different ways to do that. You can make it bright and white or dark and moody. You can use one light or 5 lights. But what I think always looks nice is when the can has these highlights on both sides and a darker area in the middle. It's a classic way to light a can. I already showed you how to create that effect when I shot a cola commercial with my Canon M50. Here you can also see those highlights on the sides of the can and then the darker area in the middle. You can check out that video right here, but for that specific commercial I used 3 lights. I think one for the background and then one to create those highlights and then one big light to light the overall scene. So now let's try to create a similar lighting but with just one light, and then we'll also replace the background in Photoshop. Or you could use any other free editing software, because I'm gonna keep it super simple. And you could use this technique also for video, but then it will get a bit more complicated if you want to replace the background or if you want to remove some imperfections. Editing photos that way, it's a bit easier. Okay, so what do you need? First of all, a light. Simple RGB lights. Of course, I'm gonna set it on white. There we go. This is the Pixel RGB light, super cheap, but does the job every time. And then what else do we need? A bunch of white things. Paper, cardboard, whatever you can find as long as it reflects light. And it's actually pretty simple. First build white walls around the can, the background white and the sides white. Only the front is open, because that's what creates the dark area in the middle of the can. So the wider the front opening is, the wider the dark area on the can will be. So it's also really important that the room you're working in is dark. I'll turn off that big light there when I take the shot. It's just for setting up now. And this is really important to understand when you're lighting shiny objects like cans or glass. So I built these white walls around the can, and that creates the highlights on the sides. But if I would leave an opening on each side of the background, or if you would use a dark background, that would create darker areas on the sides of the can. So that's how you can use highlights and shadows, dark areas, to create depth or to create separation from the background. And then the only thing we need is to position the light coming from above. Now, where exactly you put that light depends on the shape of the can or whatever you're photographing. Hold it where you get the least amount of annoying reflections. Also, use the timer function of your camera to avoid reflections of your hand in the can. Then take the shot and boom, you're done. Now, if you have a nice background and surface to put the can on, then you are basically done. But I'm going to replace the background because it looks like this way. Just make the can pop a little bit more. Okay, so we are in Photoshop, and first of all, I think the image looks a bit too warm. So let's fix that by using auto color. There. When there's a lot of white in the image, usually auto color does a good job. Then I'm going to use the pen tool to make a clipping mask, because we have to get rid of the background. But of course you can use whatever tool you're more comfortable with. Okay, so then select the Paths tab, convert the path into a selection, go back to Layers and create a mask. Okay, now we have the can on a transparent background. Next, let's add some contrast. Again, different ways to do that. Use whatever you're more comfortable with. I'm going to use a levels adjustment layer. And then I'll drag the white triangle to the left to make the whites in the image more white. Everything looks a bit too gray. Okay, the only problem now is that this area is too white. We've lost some detail. It's actually not that bad, but I want to show you how to mask real quick. If this is too complicated, just skip it. So, because I've used a levels adjustment layer, I can bring back that detail. Select the brush tool and then make sure that the layer mask thumbnail of the levels layer here is selected. I'm going to use a soft brush with low opacity set to black, and I'm going to paint over that area. Now we are actually reversing that levels adjustment layer and thus bringing back some detail. And painting with white does the opposite. That's masking. Okay, now the background. Add a new layer, drag it to the bottom, and pick a nice color depending on the colors of the can you're photographing. To create the shadow of the can, I'm gonna pick a darker green, and with a soft brush I'll add some shadow. Doesn't have to be perfect yet, something like this. And then I'm going to use the eraser tool to fine-tune the shape of the shadow. I think this looks okay. Okay, now the logo. Let's make it pop a little bit more. I'm going to use the dodge tool to brighten the midtones of the logo. See how that brightens up the logo? Of course, make sure that the layer with the can is selected here. And maybe I'll also brighten up the dark area in the middle of the can here, just a little bit. Same dodge tool set to midtones. So the dodge tool brightens areas. Now the burn tool. I'm going to make the edges of the can just slightly darker. Select the burn tool, set to highlights, soft brush, and just paint over the edges of the can to make them slightly darker. And then let's use the sponge tool to saturate those limes a bit. Okay, and finally, I feel like there's some blue and cyan color cast on the can. I'll remove that by using another adjustment layer, a hue saturation adjustment layer. You see that? If I pull the saturation of the blues all the way up, color cast. So let's pull the saturation all the way down. I don't want any blue or cyan in the can. So same for the cyans. And I think that looks pretty good now. And well, that's basically it, guys. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. You could totally do this, am I right? Yeah, I just love these let's improvise on a budget videos. I hope you liked it too. Maybe give this video a thumbs up because that really helps. Thank you so much for watching and see you in the next one.